If you detect a certain tension in the interpretation of Brescianello's violin concerto in E minor on this occasion, it's because never in the history of me coming into this building has it been, so dramatic. On an ordinary night, I've got to go through 7 layers of security between Harris Street and the studio, going through various gates and things that slash at you. It's all very dramatic. But tonight there was a huge number of Mr. Plods and other forms of security, and I wondered whether there'd been a military coup, because if there was one of the first things they'd have to do is seize the ABC. But no, it was because Pauline Hanson was on Q&A. Oh, woe is us. But all very, very dramatic. And it's put me in the right mood to discuss what the hell's been going on in Turkey. To help us sort things out, we're joined on the blower from Perth by David Tittensor, who's a Turkish politics special from Deakin University. David, thanks for your time.
Good evening.
Did you have any glimmering that this was in the wind, or that the forces were gathering that might provoke a coup?
I think, like most pundits, we were all taken by surprise by the recent turn of events on Friday evening and Saturday day, and it really just sort of came out of the blue, so to speak, and we're all scrambling, trying to figure out how and why this happened.
Now, of course, Erdogan is now blaming it on the Gulenists. Tell me who and what they are.
Well, the Gulen movement is a transnational religious movement, which is its core business is education, where they seek to meld secular sciences with religious values. And they emerged in the late 1960s, early 70s as a small group, but then since the 1980s, with the opening up of the education sector through reform, they blossomed through their own networks, and they built many, many schools in Turkey. And then in the 1990s, they've expanded to Central Asia, and since then to around 150 or 160 countries around the world, including Australia, with maybe around 16 schools or more in Australia. So they're a phenomenally large movement, and their core business is really education.
Where would you put them on the political spectrum?
They're a social movement. They're not a hard political movement. This has never tried to make themselves into a political party. They, like any social movement, have sort of chosen which party to follow at any given time, and that's shifted over time, given the different options that have been in Turkey. For example, there was, after the 1980s coup, when Turgut Özal and his Motherland Party came in, there was a more religious sensibility, so they were happy to follow that party. But they've made other choices at other times. And of course, when you had the Justice and Development Party, which was an openly religious party, at that time there was a wonderful convergence of ideas and understanding. So they were, for that reason, quite well aligned for most of the Justice and Development Party's rule up until fairly recently, about 3 years ago.
But David, you're unconvinced by this. You think it's unlikely that they are behind the coup, and you've got a number of reasons for your surmising.
Yes, I think that it's a bit of a long bow, in the sense that, as I said, they've never been a hard political movement. They've never condoned violence, and as we know, around 290 people lost their lives in the failed coup on the other day, and they've actually been under significant attack from the government since a falling out after a corruption scandal broke in 2013, where Erdogan alleged that it was Gulen members that instigated the probe, which implicated both him, his son, and a whole bunch of ministers, which caused a number of resignations. And since then, it's really been game on, and where the government has basically seized huge amounts of assets from the Gulen movement. I read recently that it's more than 20 of their holdings have been taken over. They've lost their flagship newspaper Zaman earlier this year. They also had their satellite TV stations taken off the Turksat satellite platform. And the year before that, in 2015, they had their bank, Asya Bank, taken over. And I've recently read that they've actually seized all operations, even though that was now being run by a government fund and was responding to the responsible to the Prime Minister. So they've been significantly weakened, if you like, in the Turkish sphere. Alongside that, the Gulen movement has never really had a good relationship with the military. In fact, they've always been much maligned by the secularist part of the Turkish community, and the military has always been the guardian or the bastion of secularism. And so the idea that they were able to actually curry favour with a faction of the military and organise this seems somewhat unlikely. So for these reasons, I find it's not really a plausible explanation to my mind. I would need concrete evidence, and of course the US has been asking the Turkish government for concrete evidence of this, and they're saying the coup is enough. So it'll be interesting to see in coming days whether or not they can provide the evidence, because they're currently asking for the extradition of Gulen from the US, which is I think not the first time they've done this.
But it's most unlikely the US would agree, particularly if Erdogan's threatening the reintroduction of capital punishment.
Yes, I would be very surprised if they were to agree to his extradition. Gulen himself has very boldly come out and said that if it were to come to pass, that he would gladly return to Turkey and face the music. If I were a gambling man, I would say that would be on the odds that it's unlikely to happen, to come out and make such a bold statement. He's also said that he's very happy for there to be an international inquiry into his dealings to see whether or not he's actually had any hand in this at all. So there seems to be a great degree of confidence.
It might be a bit difficult for Erdogan to get someone to judge him too, because he's got rid of so many judges. If the coup's a surprise, Erdogan's response to it isn't, because he's using it now as to justify a big roundup of his remaining critics. You would have heard on the news coming in, David, that the European Union are saying, no way will we accept Turkey as a member of the EU if they reintroduce capital punishment.
Well, I think that's just one of a long line of problems, or list of problems now that's facing Turkey in their accession. I mean, obviously there's still the issue of Cyprus, and there's the stalled legal reforms which were kind of abandoned since the early 2000s as the government took on a more authoritarian track. So I think that this is just another one to add to many issues that they would face, and I would be very surprised again if any of that would come to pass in terms of him being extradited. On the issue of the roundup, this is actually business as usual. After the corruption scandal in 2013, where he implicated the Gulen movement, there was a significant number of purges. Up to several thousand prosecutors and police were purged. So this is just another excuse to actually do further purges to help consolidate his grip on the apparatuses of the state. And of course, I've heard him say that the current failed coup is a gift from God, which has been widely reported, and of course now he's able to actually round up significant members of the military, which, as I said, has always been sort of the protectors of the secular state. So this is actually quite an opportunity for him to actually go even further than what he has.
David, it was interesting the way he got so many people out on the streets to sort of, as a mass demonstration against the military.
Well, I think that partly to do with it, there is still quite a considerable amount of support for Erdogan and his Justice and Development Party. The stalled election notwithstanding, where they lost about 8%, once it became clear that there was not really any other alternative after that election, and there was a follow-up election, they regained the lost votes, and they went back up to around 48-49%. So they are the most popular party. So it's not hard to understand how they got people to come out onto the streets. But I've read that it's also not just justice and development supporters, but there are also people from other political persuasions that were also out in the streets. And I think this is because of the memories of the previous coups and what ensued, and that there was a fear of particular chaos. And I think given the fact that you have this the possibility of civil strife with the Kurdish situation, and also the situation with ISIS, the idea of having further political instability is quite frightening for the Turkish populace at the moment. And the previous election, I think, with the swing back to AKP, the Justice and Development Party, was principally based around security and fear of further destabilisation in the country and the region.
David, thanks for coming back at such short notice. Dr. David Tittensor, Research Fellow to the UNESCO Chair for Cultural Diversity and Social Justice at Deakin.